It's a hard subject to talk about because the anger that kind of comes with it is frustrating. And I think about you too, as my daughter who's grown up with the same skin color as me, with the same spirit, of the same Manitou, as we call it, our spirit, or Gichi Mahatu. So when I look at this now, I feel proud that Senate has finally had some courage to come forward and unanimously vote against the 6-2 order in the Indian Act, turning it to the S2. So how that originated and how we got wrapped up into it, we are one of the last treaties signed in Canada, the Williams Treaty. So Nova, as you know, you're an Anishinaabe, right? You're Mississauga, you have a bit of Mohawk, and you're Ojibwe from Curve Lake. And those lands are Alderville, and then we have Curve Lake, which was once known as Mud Lake. So the Mississauga were the last people to join the Ojibwe to form the nation. So it's interesting to think that 2 generations ago, my grandmother, your great-grandmother, was Mississauga, then she became Ojibwe. My grandfather was Ojibwe, my father was Ojibwe, I'm Ojibwe, now you're white, right? Now does that make sense to you? And that's what the Indian Act was built to do, was to force the Indian out of the Indian. Whetung, which means the meeting of 2 waters, but we are only allowed to be one water, right? And that one river flows the way Canada flows. I know who I am growing up. It took me a while to find that, but I knew who I was inside. And as Indigenous people, we're taught about ourselves. We're taught about our culture, we're taught about our ways, we're taught about our people, and we're strong. And we teach our young that. And our old teach our young that. And they stay together to educate and protect each other. Well, you know that they once had to hide it, right? So it wasn't good to be Indian, right? In certain cases, people wanted to have white skin so they didn't have to be treated like an Indian, in a lot of cases as well. Because especially there's a lot of racism. That's changed a lot on the surface maybe, but I don't know how much it has ignorance-wise within. So people like yourself, when I look at something like the Indian Act, and let's go back to what we were just talking about. My grandmother, Mississauga, my grandfather, Ojibwe. My grandmother, Mississauga, is now Ojibwe, and now you're white. That's your great-grandmother. And that Indian Act was made that we can no longer have title to our land. So you remove the land, you remove the people. You remove the people, you remove the land. And all of us Indigenous people in this country feel that way. And we know that way. As soon as the language is gone, the culture is gone, right? The hardest part is maintaining that culture when your society, when your governance, all that is trying to beat it out of you. I was born under the Indian Act as a 6'2". My father was 6'1". He married a non-Indigenous woman, which made me 6'2". I married a non-Indigenous woman that made you only Canadian. But you grew up knowing what? Did you grow up thinking you were white?
No, I always knew
that you were
Indigenous. I'm Ojibwe, not Anishinaabe.
And why did you know that?
Because you taught me.
And did you had family around it?
Family.
I wanted you to grow up knowing who you were before you discover who you are, where you come from, right? Because knowing that it's a big part of understanding who you are, right? Because we walk with our ancestors' bones. They're always with us, right? Always with us. We carry that forward and we cannot forget that. Because many, many generations back, we are still walking with the same bones and we still stand. So how does the government say to us, you're not that? When you have to deal with that, Nova, and you probably don't have a lot of people saying that to you, but because of the color of your skin, you probably wonder, right? What people think, but you know you walk with Ojibwe bones, Anishinaabe bones, our strength, our courage, our 7 teachings, our 7 sacred teachings. You know all this stuff, but you don't get to express it. But inside, people don't know who you are when you know who you are. But do people want to know who you are? And I know deep down you want to tell them who you are. Well, that's what sucks about it, because we have to still follow the Indian Act, because that was a law that was written. We still have to follow treaty, but treaty was broken by Canada so many times. So having a treaty card or an Indian Act isn't as important to me as having our land and our people intact. The card having to be recognized as a government that does not want to recognize us as Indigenous people and does not want us to recognize ourselves as that, because they have to abide by the law and by the treaty to compensate for the lands, to pay rent for the lands, to give title to the lands, to give mineral rights to the lands from resources, or take and take and take is all they've done. Yeah. So because you don't have that card, your nation, your reserve, the people that already know that you are Nova Whetung cannot treat you as a band member because you don't have status. So you just got kicked out because the government said you had to go by our own people. So for our own people having to do that, it is heartbreaking because they know you exist, but they're not allowed to recognize you by law.
And I'm like constantly so afraid that people will think that I'm lying.
Yeah, about being Indigenous. What do you think about that? Why? Because of the skin color or because you don't have the status card?
A mix of both for sure. I think mostly because of the way that I look.
Yeah.
People don't usually go around being like, do you have a status card?
Yeah.
But I mean, it doesn't help to not have that kind of outside, like almost validation in a sort of way.
My grandfather fought in World War II, Alfred Whetung. He liberated Switzerland, Sweden, all these places. He went in there and liberated those countries. He fought hard. But he didn't fight hard for Canada. He fought hard for our lands, but he also fought for Canada. And because he had to fight for Canada, part of it was he had to give up his Indian status. So he said, if you're gonna fight in this war, if you're gonna fight as a fucking warrior, you cannot come back as a warrior of your people. That to me is so frustrating. Because here's a man who has risked his life for this country, for his people, for these new people, exactly how treaty should be. I'll fight for you, you fight for me. You've got my back, I've got your back. You do you, I'll do me, and we can exist. But if he is even going to fight for that country, he had to not be him when he comes back. The anger that comes with thinking my grandfather did not realize what he was coming back to. So he was not recognized as an Indigenous man, and he was not recognized as a Canadian. And the residential schools came in after that. So our family went down to New York, Buffalo, to avoid the residential school system. So grandfather came back, and his kids were now going to be a 6'1", and if his 6'1" didn't marry another 6'1", a non-Indigenous woman, his children are going to be a 6'2". And if that 6'2" doesn't marry a 6'1", then those kids are not recognized as Indigenous people anymore, and that's where you are, Nova. But within our band, you are seen as a Whetung. You're seen as a member of the band, but you're not allowed to be recognized by them. You're not allowed to be compensated your right to be paid the rent that you are owed for having them on treaty on your lands. Those lands are yours, right? They are yours. They are mine. They're my father's. They're my grandfather's. They're my great-grandfather's. They exist within you. You walk with their bones. You are that land. It is all about land, right? Where there's land, there's people. Where there's no land, there's no people. We weren't allowed lawyers to fight for our rights until the 1960s. We weren't allowed to become lawyers. We were not allowed to understand Canadian law. It was illegal for us under the Indian Act. So my band, your nation in Alderville, the money that the government pays us rent for their lands, that money gets distributed amongst the people to educate them. Our band out east in Alderville, in Roseneath, own a solar farm. We supply energy for Canada from our lands, from our solar, from our energy. And that is money that goes back in to be evenly distributed amongst our band members who are owed that so that they can be educated. That money is earned. And that money is distributed because that is our governance. Treaty is the first law, and then Canadian law, and then our laws, right? We have to respect treaty first. Canada has neglected treaty. And I remember my teacher telling me I was Métis because I look white. Sorry, I get so emotional thinking about this stuff because the anger that comes with that. Telling that teacher I'm Ojibwe, I'm Anishinaabe. So the Indian Act, as much as it's going to be hard to rewrite the Indian Act, the best thing that can come out of you becoming S2, Nova, is that our band finally gets to recognize you, right? There's a spirit within every part of that land, in the stones, in the earth, in the roots, in the leaves. Manitou exists within all of that. That spirit is what we are connected to. What S2 does is it brings our people back so we can fight for our lands. And that's why Canada is scared. So I'm not too sure what they're going to say by April 31st, but it was a unanimous vote with the Senate. And with what's going on in the United States right now, you have our two economies suffering. More than ever, Canada needs its Indigenous people to build the economy. We have two economies going within this country. Well, two different people. We have our economies and our reserves on our lands, what we can do, and Canadian economy. And with America suffering the way it is, and Canada fighting these economic trade wars that are going on across the two borders right now, more than ever, Canada needs to detach itself from that partner and start partnering within its own country with Indigenous people. That's what's going to bring us together. That is treaty. Working together to be healthy and strong together. You do you, I do me. And we need our people back. And that's what S2 will do. It'll bring our people back to us.